Thanks, Marcia. Appreciate that. I have a recording of Elvis singing that song. It's a pretty good one. I have a question for you. What will it be like in the last days? Paul, writing a letter to his protege Timothy, gives him a list. 2 Timothy chapter 3. He says, "But know this, that in the last days..." Do you think that's today? We're approaching it, right? This is what Paul is going to give us. Now we've got the cataclysmic events listed in Revelation. That's the very end of the end. But something leads up to that, and that's what we call the last days, and this is what Paul's describing here. Know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. And then he gives a list here of 19 different attributes that humanity is exhibiting in these days. Men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. And from such people turn away. Pretty graphic description, isn't it? It would be interesting to, not today, we're going to work on a different passage, but to look at the opposites of those words and see what kind of people God's people ought to be living like. Because I was thinking this week about fear and anxiety in the world around us. The news lines, in fact, several calls, people call, "Craig, can you still order solar stuff? I think I really need to order some stuff, and get it in here while I still can," and sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's, people are afraid. People are also selfish. I just read a story of a nonprofit organization that was founded to work for social justice and raised $20 million and then spent $6 million buying a mansion for themselves, just leads to it. And I was thinking about this selfishness exhibited in the world around us, and it occurred to me that they're related. Anxiety and selfishness. The thief always worries about people stealing from him. I worked on the railroad with a guy who just prided himself on being a thief. He went into Gibson's and he bought that's a kind of like a pre-Walmart type store. And he bought a canoe. So he's got two store workers carrying this canoe out in front of him, and he just takes a microwave oven, sticks it up on his shoulder, and just walks out the door with it. And then, come to work and brag. So we're at lunch one day, and we come out from the restaurant, and someone had stolen a fishing pole from the back of his truck. Oh, man, you've never seen a guy throw such a fit. Thieves are always worried about people stealing from them. The liar always thinks that other people are lying. The gossip assumes everyone else is gossiping about them, etc. 2 Peter 3 says, "Therefore, considering all this is going to burn up, all this will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you and I to be in holy conduct and godliness?" That's it right there. In holy conduct and godliness. What does that look like? Now, taking a look at Christ's teachings on what we're to be like, most clearly delineated in the Sermon on the Mount, what we call the MeAttitudes. What attitude should you be? I glanced at this corollary again between what the world teaches and what Christ teaches. People's level of peace or people's level of anxiety, selfishness, selflessness. And I was quite taken with the contrast. The opposite of peace is anxiety, etc. So then inspiration struck me, and I said, in addition to the Beatitudes, there are the MeAttitudes. I thought that was really clever. So I did a quick internet search and realized, no, however clever I thought I was not the origin of that line. It's been out there a lot, apparently, that I just missed it. But anyway, this also gave me some broader research material to take a look at this. So what I propose is these anti-Beatitudes explain our culture's anxiety. These are principles by which people live, and they're the opposite of the Beatitudes. So what I propose today is let's go through the Beatitudes and then take a look at what is the opposite of that. So three things we're looking for. How is this teaching being implemented in my life? Either the Beatitude or the MeAttitude. What is the world teaching on this subject? So those are the MeAttitudes. And then how is anxiety affected by personal ownership, my buy-in to the Beatitudes or the MeAttitudes? How is the cause and effect related there? Well, first, let's just read the Beatitudes straight through, unadulterated, as we intend to do a little later here, so that we have this clear picture of Christ's teaching. You find this in the book of Matthew, first book of the New Testament, and chapter 5 of that book. This is part of a larger sermon we call the Sermon on the Mount, a collection of Christ's teachings here. And I'll start right here in verse 1. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. And seeing the multitude, he went up on a mountain. That's why we call it the Sermon on the Mount, yeah. Went up on the mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, verse 3, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 4, Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Some good stuff there. We could do a sermon on each one of those and not exhaust it. It's applicable to our life. But as you go back through those and look at those, that's what Jesus is teaching. What is the world teaching? I mean, in verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit. Does the world teach that you should try to be poor in spirit? What does the world teach? Yeah, get rich is one. That term poor in spirit isn't a phrase we use a lot, so maybe we'd have to spend a little time with that. I think maybe the opposite is blessed are the self-sufficient, for they will climb the ladder of success. Isn't that what the world teaches? Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Have you ever tried that, by the way, just to... Or as Jimmy said, blessed is the wealth mindset, to get rich. For money controls the kingdom of this earth. That's not necessarily a wrong teaching. Do you believe money controls the kingdoms of this earth? Yeah, I do. But it's not what Jesus teaches. Maybe it's not money. Maybe it's praise of men that people desire. Blessed are those who are praised, celebrated, and honored by many, for they have reached the pinnacle of earthly success. Or maybe it's, instead of poor, the world's teaching Blessed are the sure in spirit. We easily confuse some of these items that have a positive and a negative connotation. We tend to blend and twist. I mean, there's a right teaching to be self-confident, isn't there? But when it comes to salvation and whatnot, that gets so many people in trouble. There's a right teaching about self-esteem. And we need to be able to instill that in children. And yet I think it's so much more important to teach children whose they are rather than who they are. And even pride. You know, when Paul says he's proud of this church, that's not a wrong thing, is it? And when you see your children's accomplishment or the church's accomplishment, there's a certain degree of pride that is not bad. And yet pride, so much time pride leads that we're afraid of it. So we struggle with these words that have these dual connotations. On to verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. What would be the opposite of that? Yeah, well, but there's nothing wrong with being joyful, is there? Yeah, see, but it implies that these people who are mourning, they're being beat down, so to speak, but they will be comforted. So maybe it's, blessed are those who with thick skin and no regrets, for they won't appear weak or needy or dependent on anyone. Do you believe the world teaches that? Yes, it encourages you to develop that thick skin so that you won't be beat down or dependent on anyone. Or even, blessed are those who, instead of mourn, who are self-congratulatory. They love to comfort only themselves. And instead of mourn, maybe we could put the word scorn in there. The world teaches, blessed are those who scorn. It's hard to face the reality of being a sinner when you don't think you've ever sinned. There's a scorn out there with this. It involves having no sorrow for sin, but a disdain, in fact, for boundaries and restraints, and especially for the guilt that comes from going beyond them. You ever met anyone like that? Just scorns anything to do with Christianity. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Meek is another word. We don't use that one a lot. So we're kind of, what does that mean? What's the opposite of meek? Power, pride. Blessed are the bold. They will conquer any challenge, no matter what or who is in their way. The world teaches that. Again, mixing that self-confidence up there with the wrong connotations on it. Blessed are those oppressive and abusive. They will take the earth by force. And the world connotation of meek is weak. And they use that as an excuse. Blessed are the weak. It's not my fault. I can't control myself. I'm not strong enough to resist. It's the woman you made. Or it's the snake you made. Who are they blaming there? Blaming God. That's the easy way out. That's, it's not my fault. It started way back in the garden and it's still with us. Verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They shall be filled. No hunger for righteousness is on that list that Paul gave Timothy. What we see today is blessed are those who live by their own personal truth. They'll never have to be corrected or change their mind. People are establishing their own view, if you will. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for power. They shall feed their greed. And what we also see is this adulation sort of for those who hunger and thirst for their rights instead of righteousness. Instead of appealing to the Lord's judgment, They want to uphold their own cause and stand for their rights and be avenged no matter what the cost. It's interesting, even Jesus, there in Peter chapter 2, it says, kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously. Not so worried about just defending my own rights, just doing what God has asked me to do. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, they shall obtain mercy. What's the opposite of merciful? Yeah, no mercy, merciless. Yeah. Blessed are those who judge and cancel others. They will always feel morally and intellectually superior. That's what's going on right around us today. Or the vengeful, they will show that they have the power to rule. There's this quote, and I forgot to write down who said it. It says, we attain the height of selfishness when we demand treatment from others that we're not willing to extend to them. We have been forgiven, therefore we must be forgiving. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, they will see God. I think maybe the opposite of pure in heart, what, carnal? Blessed are the carnal in heart, they won't need God. Or the world teaches, blessed are the duplicitous in heart, they'll see only themselves. And another angle on it, instead of pure in heart, maybe it's the poor in heart. Why me? What have I done? You ever met someone that has taken on the martyr syndrome to the point where difficulties arise? The question we ask is, what can I do about it? Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers. Or as Putin would say, give war a chance. Yeah. Blessed are the fighters, right? I mean, we see the world saying that. They will tear down anyone who disagrees with them. Blessed are the warmongers. They will be called children of hell. I saw a really apropos clip from a TV series about the Korean War, and one of the doctors is talking there to the priest, and he says, people say that war is hell, but war is worse than hell. And the priest says, how can you say that it's worse than hell? He says, there are no innocent people in hell, but there's lots of innocent people in war. Good point. Blessed are those who are persecuting the alien and the stranger because of self-righteousness. Theirs is the kingdom of man. Or another slant we see a lot of people. Blessed are the peacemakers. P-I-E-C-E. You ever notice people are wanting to put people in boxes, to pick them apart, put them piece by piece by piece. Experts at dividing and splintering. Rather tear down than build up. Pull apart rather than patch together. So a question I have is, if we can't make peace with one another, how would we expect to be at peace with God? And then Jesus says, blessed are you when they revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. I believe the world would say to you that blessed are you when people love you and envy you and follow all your social media accounts. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in this life. For in the same way they celebrated all the other important people who were before you. That's really all the world has to offer. Here with a little flash and then gone. People are insulting today, speaking evil against folks because of their race or their religion or their sexuality or their tax bracket. Teaches that you should feel good about yourself because of your great prosperity. That serves to prove your righteousness. That's what the Pharisees taught too. If you're wealthy, you must be blessed by God. Same way they did the prophets of old. Persecuted. Persecute those who are beneath you. Or another slant on it. Instead of persecuted, it's praised. Blessed are those who are praised for the sake of righteousness. Yeah. Again, back to that martyr complex. We think that we deserve to be applauded for our enduring to the end, lauded for our suffering. It just seems to be a constant stream of crisis after crisis. No wonder we're seeing such fear and anxiety pervade our society. Combine this reality with the society's movement away from faith and its dependence on God. The consequences are becoming clear in the world around us. It is falling apart. Drug overdoses are at a record high. People turn to substance for an escape. COVID-19 didn't help, right? This pandemic of loneliness and isolation is only increasing. Suicide rates, record highs. Stress and anxiety becoming the norm. What about you? You overwhelmed by anxiety? That story that Stan read just a piece of there in 2 Chronicles. Jehoshaphat's minding his own business, and the people of Ammon and Moab come up against him. You remember Ammon and Moab? Were they brothers or cousins? You'll have to research that one this afternoon. Back in Genesis. But there in 2 Chronicles, comes up against them, and he can't fight them and win. He knows that. It's like Ukraine against Russia. Going to have some help. So he goes to his knees, calls a fast for the whole nation. And they fast, and the prophet speaks up and reads to him, or delivers to him that passage Stan read for us, that this is not your battle. The battle belongs to the Lord. Your role in this will be to stand back and watch. So when you go out, just be prepared for that. So he does. He actually sends the singers, sends the choir first. Instead of my frontline troops, we're going to send the marching band. Okay. Anyway, it goes on when God does what he said he would do. They spend 3 days hauling the spoil back from the enemy camp. Then they call a celebration and praise God. So if you feel overwhelmed, I have 2 words for you. First, don't be ashamed. This is part of the world you live in. Scripture is filled with stories of great heroes of our faith who wrestle with fear and doubt. I mean, think of Joshua, right? Outside the city of Jericho. They've just crossed over in their camp there, and he doesn't know what to do. So he goes for a walk. That's always good therapy too. Go for a walk. While he's walking out there, he encounters the angel of the Lord. Who is that, do you think? That's Jesus Christ, pre-incarnate. Before he is born in a manger, this is Jesus Christ. And he said, be strong and courageous. It was exactly the kind of encouragement he needed. Gives him instructions, unorthodox as they were, on how we're going to take the city of Jericho. The disciples were frequently afraid. Whether it was storms in Matthew 8, or Jewish leaders in John 20, or even being associated with Jesus, as we see there in Matthew 26. They were afraid. Yet Jesus continually demonstrated his love, his compassion, and his peace to everyone who needed it. He desires to do the same for you. Second on the list, the world may be in trouble. Well, the world is in trouble, okay? But our hope is not found in this world. Instability creates anxiety. So it's critical that we place our hope in a kingdom that will never fail. Daniel 7:14, in those days God will set up his kingdom and it will never pass away. The reality is that the future of Ukraine is not promised. The future of Russia is not promised. The future of the United States is not promised. Yet God has promised that even though the kingdoms of this world may rise and fall, his kingdom will last for all eternity. So, are you willing to take your hope, faith, trust out of this world and place it in his kingdom? The question remains for us, by what values will we live by? Will we adopt the Beatitudes, as bizarre as, he goes on in this sermon to talk about loving your enemies, things that we really struggle with. Jesus' Beatitudes are what make his people the salt of the earth. The MeAttitudes are what just make people crusty old salty beings, destined to become bitter. The choice is ours. The choice is yours. Through which is God glorified? Through which is Christ seen living in us? Here's the question: to whom does service belong? To me or not to me? That is the question. So today, prayerfully, humbly, ask the Lord to let us shine brightly in a world that desperately needs peace and blessing that only God can provide it. May we hold up this light that's so attractive that people just want to know, where does that light come from? And we'll ask you about it. That's my prayer in Jesus' name. For closing hymn, we're going to sing number 306, Draw Me Nearer, Nearer, Nearer Every Day.